Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Into the Pit. And I have here Miss Eleanor Wagner, and you're founding member of the Lady Ghost Hunters. Is that correct?
The Lady Ghostbusters.
Oh, Ghostbusters. I'm sorry, Ghostbusters.
That's okay. That's all right.
And you have some books.
I do.
Okay, we're going to talk about those here shortly. But first, if you don't mind, just tell me a little bit about you.
Sure. As you mentioned, my name is Eleanor Wagner. I live in New Jersey in the mountains by High Point State Park. And during the day, I'm a teacher's aide, but by night, I'm a paranormal investigator, and I write all the time.
So, when did you start your team?
Actually, that started when I was writing my first hauntings book. I've been writing my entire life, and my first book was actually published in 2015. But when I started writing the Hauntings series, which is a book on true account of ghost stories that take place in and around the county where I live, that's when the necessity for a team erupted. And so I just started it. And we've been going ever since. Was
that from like accounts from locals, or how did you get those stories?
Yeah, social media is magic. It can be good and bad, right? So I had posted online at the time, and I said, thinking about writing this book on local hauntings. Would anybody like to share their story with me? Because I have my own accounts. I owned a haunted antique shop right in town, and I've seen spirits since I was a kid. So I thought, well, I've got plenty of stories of my own, and if I ask anybody in the community if they want to share their stories with me, I can put it into a book. And so the idea was really just at that point in my brain, and I was getting the juices going, but when the call started coming in, it was something that was going to happen. I knew at that point. I started collecting folders of people's stories, not only from the county where I live in, but in surrounding counties outside. So if I was going to write about counties in Sussex County where I live, fine. But then I had folders from Warren County, Morris County, Passaic County, and I said, those will probably eventually be books too. And what I like to do with my stories is tell people about the history of the towns. So if I have a story about Sussex, say where I live, I'm going to tell them about the history of Sussex. And then if I'm talking about a specific building, if I have the history of that building because it's really old and maybe be in the historic book in the community, I'll tell them about that. And then I'll start to tell them the accounts that people have shared with me. And if I have an opportunity to go into that building with my paranormal team, then I can also add to the chapter whatever it is that we unearthed in our investigation at the time.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. That's all right.
Well, I was going to ask you, did you get any people that were a little bit reluctant to tell their story, or were they pretty anxious to get it out?
I guess it depended on what the story was about. Naturally, I've proposed the idea on social media. So if someone were to come and reach out to me, it's because they've decided that they want to do this. Excuse me. There was one occasion, though, where I had gotten this really creepy story from the girl who does my nails. And she's got, I got this great story to tell you. And she goes and she tells me this story. So now I'm like itching to get to this house. So I go up to the house and knock on the door. Nobody answers. And then some guy comes out and he goes, oh, I'm working on the house. It's getting listed by a realtor. Like, okay, well, let me leave my business card and tell them, I know your building's haunted. Why don't you reach out to me and tell me about it? So I ended up pushing it a little further and put it on social media that I was looking for accounts for this particular location. So you know how Facebook has all these particular groups that belong to the community,
right?
So I went on to all of that. Say, hey, it's me. I'm the woman who wrote the Sussex County Haunting series, and I'm working on another book, and I'm looking for accounts for this particular location. So this guy, like you could see in his message, oh my God, exclamation mark, I need to talk to you. So I'm like, okay. So I connect with him and he's like, I have a really creepy story about that place. I was living in there. And he almost didn't want to tell me. Now he reached out to my comment, right? And he's responded to it, but now he's like a little nervous about telling me the story. And he ended up telling me about it. And his account of that home where he lived with his then girlfriend was exactly the same as my nail technician's account with her boyfriend. And it was just a different couple at a different time. And of course, they had other things that had happened to him and her in their stories, because they had, like, he was living with his girlfriend and her two kids. So they were being affected by it. But the spirits in that home were emotionally attaching to them and creating issues amongst the couples. And it wasn't until they got away from the home that things went back to normal again. But yeah, so in that respect, you do have people that reach out to you and then they almost want to say, maybe this is not a good idea if it's a scary story. But usually if it's a good story, they're openly receptive and they're like, yeah, and they want to tell me. And then few of the cases I have people say, use the story, but just change my name. Like a friend of mine who lives down the road, when she told me about her Bigfoot experience, she's like, can you just do me a favor and just not mention my name, because she grew up in this area and she doesn't want anyone to know that.
Of course.
She had this Bigfoot encounter. So
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people that are doing the cryptid part of the paranormal, and they'll go and they'll say, oh, so and so over there had an encounter, go talk to them, and they're like, oh, I don't think I want to talk about this, because they're afraid of being ridiculed. I mean, you can't blame them.
Sure,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's a little more accepted now than what it was when we were kids. Back then they would say you were a nut.
Well, that's why when I hear cases about back in the day, it's almost like swept under the rug, or they have a name for it. Oh, it's nothing, it's the big hairy guy. And you want to hear something funny though? When I was writing that first book, it was only supposed to be called Sussex County Hauntings. And then I had people reaching out to me with their Bigfoot stories in the park that I mentioned to you earlier, High Point State Park.
Right.
And people reaching out to me with their UFO encounters. So I was like, how am I going to get them into this book on hauntings? So I added the other strange phenomena category so that I could. And in that first book, the Bigfoot chapter was probably the biggest chapter in the book. So I was glad that I ended up adding it in, because there are a lot of Bigfoot stories in this area.
Oh yeah. Something that I've noticed when I've talked to people, especially in the cryptid side, they seem to always mention UFOs and ghosts all in the same area. And I've asked this question before, but do you think there's some kind of correlation with that?
With ghosts, no. I just think it draws people's attention because it's something that we don't normally really talk about. It's out of the ordinary. And so when you hear somebody's talking about ghosts, well, this is my opportunity to tell them about my UFO story. Although I do find in pretty much every case that people who are sensitive to spirit have had experiences with other things. And I don't know if that's a commonality because of the sensitivity. And if there's a reason for it, I don't know, but I have noticed that people who are sensitive to spirit have experiences in other arenas as well.
So you said that you see ghosts. Does that mean you have abilities? And if you do, what exactly are they?
I am sensitive to spirit. I'm not as good as some of the members of my team. They're amazing, but they're ordinary people just like you and I. I think my problem was that I had stifled it when I was a kid, because I didn't have the nurturing family that said, oh, it's okay, it's nothing to be afraid of, that kind of thing. I just had the mom who said it was a dream, it was a nightmare. And so I lived with this spirit thinking that I was just imagining it. And it wasn't until I got older when I realized he was just trying to get my attention because I could see him. And then I had other instances where I was having premonitions and mom would say it was just a dream. And then when the big, really scary one came true, I shut down totally. It was like, I'm done, And so it wasn't until I was 30 and the day my dad died, I was on my way into the city to be at his side in the hospital and was sitting in bumper to bumper traffic on the bridge when he came to me and he let me know that he was already gone. And so that was kind of like a reawakening for me, because all of a sudden it just all came back to me and I'm thinking, this is a beautiful story that I could share with the family and friends at his wake and his funeral. But it was also like a wake-up call for me that, I had something that I needed to not be afraid of and to just learn more about. So I started learning about it later in life, and really have always been fascinated by the paranormal, but really never jumped into it or dug into it as much as I did when I started at 30. And then really my career with paranormal took off when I
Yeah.
hit 50.
I've heard that from several people that, they're sensitive like you are, empaths and so on and so forth. And like you, when they were kids, they were either told to dismiss it or they didn't realize what was going on. I mean, for myself, mine was auditory. So I would
Oh, okay.
hear, somebody would say my name or say, hey, or something like that. I just thought it was in my head. And I was like, oh, that was
Mhm.
cool. I wish my brain would do that again.
Well, you probably think you wish you kind of assume everybody else is the same way. Everyone else is feeling the same thing. And then when you finally realize, no, you're kind of different. Not everybody's feeling the same things. Then it kind of makes you wonder, why am I feeling this? And I don't understand. I am empathic, like you said, and it wasn't until later in life that I actually learned what that was about too. It was kind of like an aha moment for me when I realized what that was. And now it's easy for me to define it for other people who are wondering whether they're empathic or not. But for me, it took me a really long time to understand that. And it also is enlightening that you
Yeah.
have this, and you don't have to be ashamed of it, and you can just now just learn to understand it, which is great. And some people do learn about it later in life, and that's okay with me. If I learn now and I can do something with it, that's great. But I'm not as good as some of the other people, as I mentioned before. But for me, it's kind of like I get this foofy feeling that I call it foofy. I'll go into a room and I'll sense that there's something there, and I'll know if it's good or if it's bad. I almost feel like I'm drunk. I get like off balance, kind of. That's the
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
that I get. I wish it was auditory. That would be great. I wish I could hear it, you know?
Well, the thing is when I got older and I got divorced and I was living in this townhome. It's just me and my boys, and we lived. I mean, you could walk out my front door in 2 minutes. You're right in the cemetery. But I didn't put two and two together. I kept hearing the voices. I thought I'd gone crazy, and I even checked myself into a hospital.
Really?
It
How old were
was,
you when that happened? How late in life was that?
I want to say I was in my early 40s when that happened.
Wow. Okay.
So
So
you're
it was later too.
talking probably about 10 years ago or so. So yeah, that's it was freaky to say the least. Now, do you write about your premonitions?
No, I wrote about my history of, my background and how old I was when I first saw the spirit in my home, and take people on that journey in my first book,
Mhm.
along with my accounts that I've experienced in my life, and then the accounts of other people. And then when you go into book 2 and the Warren County hauntings story, and Sussex 3, which I'm working on now, it's really more about more of those stories that people have shared with me and experiences we've had as a team.
Now, I know you talked about your father, but is there any other premonitions that you could talk about?
Well, yeah, if you want me to fill you in on the story about my dad, be more specific about it.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Okay, sure. I was It was the hottest day of the summer in June, and I was driving into the city from New Jersey, and I was stuck in bumper to bumper traffic on the GW Bridge. And I still remember my father's voice in my head, and my husband too, thinking, turn off the car or else your car's going to overheat. Turn off the air conditioning or the car's going to overheat. So turn off the air conditioning, and I roll down the windows, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so hot. And I'm more like nervous and frustrated because I'm sitting in this traffic and I'm desperate to get back into the city so I can get to my dad's side. And all of a sudden I feel like I'm in a drive-in movie, because I'm sitting in my seat of my car, and this screen opens up in front of my face. And literally it had to have been maybe a few minutes that I watched, but I felt like I had watched a full blown movie,
Oh my
because
gosh.
I could see my dad, And his story was he had retired that January. He was diagnosed with cancer in February and he was gone by June. So those last months, he was angry and bitter because he had busted his ass his entire life and was looking forward to that retirement.
Of course.
And now he had this cancer. So it really sucked. So in this vision that I saw him in his, he used to wear his pull-up socks and sandals and shorts, and he was walking and he was angry and he was scared and he was frustrated and he was nervous, all these negative emotions, and I could feel them. And he was walking in this cloud, and all of a sudden he sees this light and he starts walking towards the light. And all of a sudden my husband's deceased aunt, Anne, comes into the picture, and she had died the year before. And she's like, "Hi, Carl, how you doing? Come on over here. I have others that want to meet you." And he's kind of now looking at her like really confused, like, what's going on here? Why are you here? You know, you're dead, you know? So she brings him into this circle of lighted beings. And I couldn't physically see them in their human form, but I knew who they were. They were his deceased siblings and his parents and his best friend who had died the year before. And they all embraced him. And all of a sudden, all those negative emotions that he was feeling disappeared. And he felt joy and elation and happiness. And my dad didn't smile very often, but his smile was from ear to ear. And then I'm sitting in the car seat, bawling my eyes out. And the people in the car next to me are looking at me. And you think they would have said, "Are you okay?" But nobody said nothing. I'm just bawling my eyes out in the car because I just realized this is him telling me he's gone. And when I finally did make it to the house, my sisters and my mom were waiting for me. And I said, "He's gone, isn't he?" And they were like, "Yeah." So I knew it. And this was a story that I was just thrilled to share with everyone at his wake and his funeral. But for me, like I said to you earlier, it was this new awakening. It was like, I'm going to embrace whatever this is, because if I could share stories like this with other people that experience their loved ones who have been departed, it's going to bring just joy to them, because I felt wonderful knowing he was out of pain and happy where he was. So go ahead many years, my mother-in-law and I always used to talk about this sort of thing, and she had said that if she ever has the opportunity to let me know that she's okay when she's gone, she'll do the same. And she was taking us really quickly, really early. We had no idea that she was going. It was just like 1 minute she was here and the next minute she was dying in hospice in my home.
Oh my gosh.
And we brought her home literally to die. Of course, they don't give you any kind of idea of how long that this person is going to last. And you only hope that it ends for them quickly and not makes them linger for months in that state, right? So
Right.
we brought her home, and it was Wednesday afternoon, and we set up the hospital bed in the dining room, which is the room right below my bedroom. So we had her attached to an oxygen tank, and you could hear the tank, you could hear her like grab her breath, go like, and then you could hear the oxygen tank go, you know, so it was like, and this is what we were listening to the entire time she was here. And when I went to bed at night, this is what I could hear. So I knew she was breathing, and I heard the oxygen tank. Then all of a sudden I wake up at 3:17 in the morning. I mean, I got up and I looked at the clock, and that's how I knew what time it was. It said 3:17. And I lay there in bed and I'm listening. And all I hear is choo, choo, choo. So I know she's gone because I don't hear her grabbing for that breath. So I'm laying there going, okay, am I going to get up now? Or am I just going to let it go? So I decided to just let it go, because my sister-in-law was, everybody had, it just been a week of no sleep, and the emotions were just so, you know, and now that I knew that it was over, let's just let everybody sleep and we'll wake up and we'll deal with it in the morning. And that's literally what I did. And so get up in the morning and I knew what was going on. I said, Steve, I got to tell you what happened. I tell my husband, and when we go down, and of course she's gone. And then we wake up my sister-in-law, and then the whole day goes of dealing with what happened. And across the street at the time was a friend who was a nurse. And she comes over to check on us and see how everything's going, because she had just come from hospice the day before. And she's like, how's everything going? And we explained to her that she had passed. She goes, oh my gosh, I was thinking about you guys all night. My husband and I couldn't sleep. We woke up at 3:17 in the morning and couldn't get back to bed. And I'm thinking, what did you just say? It wasn't like she said, we woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, we woke up at 3:30 in the morning. She said, we woke up at 3:17 in the morning.
That's
See, stuff like that
nuts.
to me, it's not a coincidence.
No,
You know
it's
what I mean?
not.
That's no, that was meant that, and some people might say, bullshit, that's a coincidence. I'm sorry, but it's not. You know, me, it would have been, oh, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I would have woke up at 3:30. I would have probably said I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but because she was so specific about the time, and I had woken up at that precise time and saw the clock, I knew my mother-in-law was telling me that she was okay. And so there was this other glorious story that I could share with people at her wake and funeral.
Hmm.
So these kind of stories are just so poignant,
Yeah.
and they mean so much, and they really do help with the grieving process, because it allows you to know that even though they're not here in their physical form, they are with us all the time. You know, so I know it's not technically ghostly, which is another reason for the other strange phenomena chapters, because I love to share these kind of stories with people, because it's not a ghost story. These are
Yeah.
visits from your deceased loved ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for sharing that. It had to been hard to talk about, but I mean, at
Thank you.
least it was a beautiful moment for you, because you actually, you got to experience what you experienced, and you know that they're okay. But being that I retired not too long ago myself, uh, you kind of think about your mortality and the things that you've missed out on, and it's great to be retired, but I mean, to have cancer, I have a degenerative disease in my spine, is why I had to retire. So I'm not exactly enjoying retirement, but still, that's way worse than what I've experienced. Hmm.
We get to a point, when we hit that 50 mark, it's kind of like you start to realize what your mortality is, and you think about how much time you really have left, and then you start to hear about people that that you've been close with in life, and who's really sick and who's dying, or somebody passes away, and it's like, oh my God, how much time do I really have? And so you want to make the most of the time you have left, and that's almost why I'm so thankful that, even though it took me until I was 50 to have the opportunities that I have now, I don't regret anything I did. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was able to raise my children. I was a children's party clown for over 30 years. So I was a clown on the weekends so that I could be home with my children during the week. I was that Girl Scout mom. I was that 4-H mom. I was that women's club leader, the playgroup leader. That's, I went to all the kids' activities at school, and I don't regret a moment of it, because when they were old enough and out of the home, now I have the chance to do what I need to do right. And I'm
Guess-
okay with that, even if it is later in life, you know.
you know, sometimes I would sit and I would regret that some of the things that I did, but then I think, you know what, if I hadn't gone through what I've gone through, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now, and I wouldn't have the family that I have right now. Well, I got to know what's in those books. So just
Well,
gotta give.
if you like history.
Oh, I love history.
Well, I say everybody can love a ghost story. It doesn't matter whether you live in the area or not. I mean, I know whenever we go to Cape May, New Jersey, which is my favorite place in New Jersey, down at the shore, it's this little Victorian town, and they have horse and buggies. Excuse me, my dogs are going crazy over here. And they they have horse and buggy going up in the streets, and all the houses are restored and renovated to their natural grandeur. I go into the bookstore looking for the latest hauntings book because it's very haunted town, and they've always got new stories coming up from people who have visited homes or lived in homes over the years. So it doesn't matter where you're from. A good story, a good ghost story is a good ghost story regardless, right?
Right.
So I like to help people step back into time and learn about the places that I live. So I talk about the history of the towns and the buildings that they're in, and then I tell the stories of the people who have shared them with me. And I guess as I've been doing them over time, people have learned that I'm doing this, and so more and more people have been reaching out to me with their stories. And like I had mentioned to you, I do collect them from other counties, and so I ended up writing Warren County Hauntings, which is surrounding county from Sussex County, and I will be writing about other counties as well. But I still am writing my paranormal romances. So this was the very first book that I wrote, Dream a Little Dream. It's one of those sit on your edge of your seat kind of thrillers. If you like King and Kuntz and that kind of thing, and a little bit of romance, you can get it in that quick read, Dream a Little Dream.
So the one you wrote about Sussex County, is there any stories that you can share without giving the book away?
Oh, yeah, I don't think they would be giving the book away because there's so many stories in there. But like one of my favorites is with one of my team members. Actually, when I first started establishing the Lady Ghostbuster team, we had this opportunity to go and do an investigation in the Sterling Hill mines in Ogdensburg, New Jersey. I had been talking and interviewing so many people who led me to another person, who led me to another person. I finally am talking to this president of this mine. And he's going, I'm a scientist. I'm not supposed to believe in any of this stuff, but I can't explain why it's going on. He said, why don't you bring your paranormal team over here into the mines and on our buildings and have an investigation? And I'm like, that sounds like a great idea. And I'm going, I don't have a paranormal team. I got to get one together. So like agreeing to do something, but I had nobody. So that's really what got the fire lit under my ass. And so what I did is I ended up reaching out to people that I had worked with in the past when I'd gone away on like haunting weekends with girlfriends of mine. And then I had reached out to some of the people that I had interviewed and said, hey, you want to come along on this adventure with me? And so they took me up on my offer, and that's how the team got started. And
Oh,
so from that point on, it's expanded because, people get referred to me, or I'll interview somebody else along the way. And I kind of go with my gut. If I feel like somebody might be a good fit, or somebody wants that kind of adventure and they could be a good addition to the team, then I offer them the opportunity. If they want to come, they come. I'm kind of like want to help people out of their shells too, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So one of the girls, Deb Zielinski, she was one of the original people that I had interviewed at the time. And she came on that original investigation too, in the mines, because she used to live in that town and loved the mines growing up, and said, yeah, I definitely want to go on that. Well, one of the stories she had shared with me is she's a nurse. And so she works in geriatrics. So she deals a lot with senior citizens, and they see a lot of stuff in hospitals, nurses, doctors. They see a lot of stuff, especially the nurses, because they're with the patients more often than anything. And because she's sensitive, she even goes a little further than the average Joe, because she can sense spirit. So she was accustomed to seeing death come for patients. And she said it would be anywhere from 3 days to like a week or two before the person died that you would see death and know that that patient was on their way out.
Hmm.
And so this one time that she was on, she said death itself, she said, is not really as daunting and frightening as you would think. It's kind of like this little old guy with a black trench coat and hat. She says, it's not really scary. She said, but the bad side of death is creepy as all heck. And she referred to it as a Nosferatu limb-like creature with these bright red eyes. And she said, one night she was on shift, or earlier on when she was like first starting out at this particular job, she was working with another woman, I think her name was Jamie, and they were getting ready to relieve or go off shift and somebody else was coming on, that kind of thing. I guess when they switch out their shifts. And so the three women were in the hall at one time when they were doing this shift change, when they hear this senior citizen from one of the rooms screaming at the top of her lungs, help me, it's trying to get me. So they're like, what the heck? And all three of them run in the direction of this woman's room. Now, this woman, I'd like to add, was not a very nice person. She was like really rich, and she had this corner room with the window, and she was really nasty to all of the nurses, and she thought her shit didn't stink, put it that way. But here she is screaming at the top of her lungs that whatever it is trying to get her. So the girls are going into the room, and they flick on the light. And when they flicked on the light, they see this thing like on top of this woman in her bed. And when they flicked on the light, it kind of snapped its head in their direction, and they could see its bright red eyes. And they almost like took a step back out of the hall, out into the hall, like, oh my God, what the hell is that? And it kind of like took off and went through the wall. And one of the girls was on her knees praying because she just was like, oh my God. I mean, I get, for Deb, who was a sensitive and who had seen spirit ever since she was a kid, she was freaked out. But these other two women had never experienced anything like that before. And it was like shock to them, you know what I mean? And so when they finally got their bearings, the one girl who was on the floor praying, she was just kind of like in shock. They just left her there. The other two women went into the room to go over to Gladys, the woman, and they were like, trying to console her and say it was just a dream. Meanwhile, they're trying to keep their cool because they just saw this thing. They didn't even know what the hell it was.
Right.
Trying to console her. And when they finally, calming her down, they went into the bathroom to go and get water. And all of a sudden the lights in the bathroom were flickering on and off, and the water and the faucet was going on and off. I mean, this thing was crazy active, even though it had left the room wherever it did go. And, they did whatever they could to console her and tell her that it was just a dream. But when they were in the bathroom, the one said to the other, what the hell was that thing? And sure enough, I think it was like a day or two later, Gladys ends up dying. But I'm sure she didn't go up. I'm pretty sure she went down if that thing was coming for her.
That's a sad thing to think about.
I know it is, but she was this woman that would make them take her toothbrush and wash the floor with it. That's how. And because she was a resident who had a lot of money and they paid, they had to do what she told them to do. So she wasn't a nice person. I don't like to wish it on anybody, but you reap what you sow. So whoever is listening, beware, be good in life, because you are going to pay for your actions.
Now, being a paranormal investigator and a writer, has any of this like affected your spirituality personally?
I am a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really consider myself of any particular denomination. I was born and raised a Catholic, but had a really bad experience with that. And when my children were growing up, we ended up going to a Methodist church, which is near us in our home, because it was a comfortable place to go. But the bottom line for me is I consider myself a Christian, and Jesus is my Lord and Savior. And that's where I am with that. But even as a Christian, I shouldn't say as a Christian, in different religious denominations, they have these restrictions and they tell you you can't believe in this and you can't believe in that. Yep. And I don't like that. I like knowing where I am with God, but I believe in reincarnation 100%. I believe that we come back more than once because we've got lessons to learn before we can stay in paradise. And so, certain religions are going to say that's not true, it's not in the Bible. So that's where I have a conflict of interest when it comes to that sort of thing. So when somebody says, where do you stand on religion? I am a Christian. Jesus is my Lord and Savior. But I do believe that what we have, these are gifts. Mm-hmm. And I believe that there are definitely referrals to them in the Bible. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that they haven't told us that we don't know about. And perfect example is the wise men. They were reading the stars. They were astrologists. So right. If you're going to tell me that, being a medium or, being somebody who can listen to spirit is a bad thing, then why weren't the wise men considered bad men? You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So there's like this whole conflict of interest where all of that is concerned. So I stand on who I am, what I believe in, but there are a lot of other things I believe in, and there are a lot of things we don't know about,
Yeah.
all in a nutshell.
I've had that discussion about the Bible and how much of it is actually the word of God and how much of it is just like a political thing with the churches and the government at that time. You know, maybe they saw psychics and mediums as a threat and decided to make them to be evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
how do we know? You know,
we don't.
we don't. But I'm like you. I mean, I don't claim any specific religion. I don't believe in religions itself. I'm a spiritual person. I believe in God. I believe Jesus Christ is my savior, and I think that's the most important
That's all
thing.
you. That's all you need. That's all you need.
Mhm.
You don't need any kind of organized religion. I mean, I specifically had decided to bring my children up that way because I wanted them to feel that family and that and get that experience and um education, so to speak. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? But you can get the best education at home anyway. What you do and say to your children is first and foremost, and it helps to form them as adults. And I mean, I say that even as a kindergarten aide, a teacher in school. We have the students in school, and there's only so much we can do when they're with us, and we can set that example. But when they go home, that's where they're going to learn the basis of everything that's going to take them through life,
Mhm.
and it's going to make them the people that they are, as and the adults as they are as they grow older. So um yeah, so yeah. I
Well,
don't know where I was going with that.
well, and feel free to chime in on this one, but I've talked to several different mediums, and their idea of why we have reincarnation is that you're given an opportunity in each life to reach a certain level of what's the word I'm looking for? Like
It's like getting
what's
a
the
certificate,
well,
an
yeah,
accomplishment certificate, sort of.
something like that.
I
I
know what
mean,
I know what you're talking about.
when you're trying to get to a certain
A
frequency, I
higher
guess
a higher place. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and
And you can refuse. You can say, you can choose not to come back, or to wait it out, or and from what I feel is that we get to choose the life that we want to go into and the experience that we want to have, who our parents are going to be, and what we're going to endure and what we're going to learn from that experience. That's how I've come to understand it, and I do believe that. I truly believe that um, it's real. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had dreams of things that I just couldn't explain. And I've had memories of things that I'm telling you, they happened. And when I talked to my mom, she's like, that, no, we were never there. That never happened. So I had all of these questions in my mind about those experiences, and why am I so connected to the Victorian era? Like, why am I so attached to it? That kind of thing. That I decided to have uh, uh, go to a hypnotist so that she could give me more information, if possible, on past life, um, for me. So I had a past life regression, and I started to write a chapter on reincarnation, which is coming out in my next book, because I think that was probably the thing that pushed me to do that. I was talking to so many people who had reincarnation experiences, and some people had actually found out who they were before, and people who have children now that are talking about who they were. I mean, usually it's at 5 or 6 years old that they start to forget those memories, but I'm interviewing people whose children are telling them. And there's no way I work with 5-year-old kids. I know how smart they are, but what they're capable of and the things that these children talk about, it's just not possible. So it's what prompted me to go and get regressed. And it was a pretty amazing experience for me. And I want to do it again because it was like, wow, that was really, really cool. And in a way, I'm almost like, is it real? Did I actually go through that? Did I actually say all those things? That but I feel like I wasn't sitting there making it up. I was doing it for myself. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. The person that was the clinician or whatever you want to call them that did the regression, she didn't care whether I was going to learn anything from it or not. You know, I was her, I guess, patient, you can call it, but she really didn't care. She was just going to try to help me reach that goal, but she wasn't going to put anything into my mind because she's not trying to be a past life regressionist. That's not what she does. I mean, it's part of what she does, but it's not like what she makes her money on, so to speak. So it wasn't like she had anything to gain by me having this experience. So, and like I said, not out to prove anything to anybody. I'm just out to learn more about myself
Oh yeah.
and experience more for myself to better myself. So
I've had that past life regression done, and even if it was not real, which I think it was real, but even if it wasn't, it helped me in so many ways, and to realize some of the things that I was going through and a better understanding of it. So I recommend it. You know, it's a
I do
therapy
too.
session.
It really is. And I have heard through my research too, that people who have had recurring problems, whether it be sleeping or fear of water, these are just examples I'm throwing at you, that they haven't been able to overcome in this lifetime. When they've been regressed, they've found out that in their past lives, they've had the same fears or problems that they do now. And when they went even further back, they were able to trace it to a lifetime where something happened to them, where they drowned, for example. And so that's why they have such a fear of water. And once they realized that's what it was, that fear no longer existed because now they understood and they were able to overcome it,
That that it's a
which
pretty
is
amazing
amazing.
experience. I like I said,
The
I
brain
recommend
is
it.
a, yeah, I do too. Your brain, the way it works, and now that you're recognizing the fact that that's what it was, and
Mhm.
now you're able to accept it. It's crazy cool.
So your book about Warren County, what can you tell us a good one out of that book?
In Warren County Hauntings, I actually wrote about some infamous stories that actually took place. I like to tell them stories that they've never heard of, but then there are just some that are so good that you don't want to leave out. One of the stories is about Tilly Smith from Centenary University. She had worked in the university. At the time, it was a college. Now it's a university. They switched the name. And it was in the 1800s. And she was coming home from a theater show with some girlfriends late at night. And they always had a time frame that they had to be into the university or else you get locked out for the night. So I think it was 10 o'clock. She had to be back by 10 o'clock. If she got locked out by the doors, there was no way back into the building. Well, the night that she was rushing to get back in, she was like a minute late and she had to try and find a way to get in. And while she was outside, she was attacked and raped and murdered right on the property of the school. And so in my research, I've had people come out to tell me about sightings of her, security guards, obviously students, because students have lived in and around on the dorms over there. And so I wanted to tell her story because it was definitely a big deal for back then. And there were a couple of books that were written about it, which I read in my research, which were very interesting. And my daughter went to that university, so it was kind of hitting a little bit home. And I did go to visit her grave that they erected after she had passed away. She was very poor, and she
Mhm.
was in like a pauper's grave actually, and the town embraced her whole story, and they raised money to erect this beautiful monument in her memory, and then they moved her body into that grave, and it stands in the cemetery in Hackett's Town. And so I went to go visit the grave. So that story is really interesting. That's in the Warren County book. And then there's also the Changewater murders. Both those cases, actually, the Tilly Smith story and the Changewater murders, I feel after doing all the research that I've done, that the person who was convicted of killing Tilly Smith did not do it. And although he was convicted and supposed to be hung, they did not hang him, and they ended up eventually letting him out of jail. I think it was her boyfriend who did it, to be truthful with you, in my research. And then in the Changewater murders too, I feel like they killed two innocent men. They hung two innocent men who really were not the perpetrators of the murders of the family in that particular case. And when I think I know who it was, that a family member who was the one who did it, but obviously that was in the 1800s. But I spoke to family members from both sides, and their heirs, ancestors, who felt the same thing that I did, that they were wrongfully convicted. So those are very interesting stories that a lot of people don't know about it, that live in the area. They've never heard of it. They're like, what? That happened here? And so I like to talk about them and tell the stories, because apparently the area where these two convicted men, they were not allowed to be buried in sacred cemetery because they were convicted murderers. So they buried them in this obscure place in the middle of nowhere. And so that those places are considered to be haunted with their ghosts because they were wrongfully convicted. And then there's also, on the cover of the Warren County book, which is this one, if you can see, it's the train station here. This is a memorial setup to the people that lost their lives in the Rockport train wreck, which happened in the 20s. They were on their way to take a boat to go back to Germany, all of these people on the train, and a huge storm came into the county and washed out the railroad track.
Oh, wow.
And when the train came through, it obviously, the tracks weren't there. And so this huge accident occurred, and the people were fried practically, because the boiler where it was on the train and the steam engine and all of this just exploded. It was just a really horrible thing.
Oh my
And
God.
so they have this memorial site, which was only erected in the early 2000s by a student who grew up in that area, because nobody really knew about this crash that took place. And he took it upon himself to get a team of people together and clean up the area and put a memorial there, because he felt like he wanted to pay tribute to these people who had passed away at that site. And when I heard the story, I was like, well, that's really interesting. I'm sure that must be a really active place. So we went with the paranormal team to go and check it out. And I'm so glad I trusted my gut on that one, because on that first investigation, we're walking on the tracks, and all of a sudden, you know how when you have these train stops, the bells go off, and it goes like ding, 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 and the lights go off, right? We're on the train tracks, and all of a sudden these lights and bells go off, and we're like, oh my God, there's a train coming. And we all run off the tracks waiting for a train to come, and no train comes. And then we're like, oh, wait a second. That's peculiar. So we realized, is there a spirit here with us? Are you trying to let us know that we're not supposed to be on the train tracks, and the lights and the bells go off again?
Oh, wow.
And this happened like 6 times while we were there, that we were communicating with spirit. That it was a spirit of one of the men who worked on the train, and he was there intentionally. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to make sure that no other accidents happened on that track, like what happened the night that he died, which was really interesting. And my medium that was with us that night, she was coming up with all these different names, and she was taking notes. And when we actually went back and did research and got the tourist list of the names and stuff, all of the names she came up with were on the list
Oh, no way.
as people that, which was crazy cool. I was like, oh my God, that is really cool. And like I said, we'd gone back there 3 times. And another time we went back, somebody was running their audio at the time. And it's a functioning train track, but it's more about supplies. It's like supply trains that come through. So it's not like a regular passenger train line where it would be constantly going with trains. They come through every now and again, and it's not that frequent. And so we can walk on the tracks and not really worry about anything. I mean, we knew that now, but when we first went there, we didn't know that. and we had the audio going. And when she listened to it later, she actually heard like like, and it, like in the distance, like a
Like the old
whistle of a
steam.
train.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, which was really cool too. Now that to me is residual energy. That could be
Yeah.
just residual kind of stuff. And another time we went back, some of the mediums, we saw about, I think it was 4 men walking across the track in our direction, um, which were, spirits from the actual wreck. But yeah, that was definitely a very good site to go to. But and I always let them know when I'm doing an investigation. I let them know who I am and why I'm there,
Right.
and then I want to acknowledge them, and that I'm going to tell their story and keep them in the loop. And it seems to always warrant some good when you're honest with them and you are inclusive and acknowledge them. You know,
Is any of the stories in your books considered to be urban legends?
I'm pretty sure only one that I can recall, which has to do with, I think it's what the heck is it? It's in Vernon, and that's in Sussex County where I live. And I'm pretty sure it's people have said that they have seen this little horse, not horse, I'm sorry, mule pulled cart that lights up by this little like lake pond of sorts. But that story goes back so far that you tend to think of it as a legend, but people claim to have seen this lighted wagon with this mule sort of thing.
Now, if people want to get your books, where do they go to get them?
Author EleanorWagner.com has the links to everything on there. What I have my books as well. So I'll have picture of the location, and I'll have picture of different things pertaining to the stories, but I also put everything on my website as well. They can see things in full color, and if they've read about a video that somebody sent me or an audio that I talked about, for example, like the train audio with the locomotive, steam locomotive, you can actually go to my website and you things, and you could watch those videos and see them for yourself.
Oh,
So
cool.
it's author EleanorWagner.com.
I will put that link in the description so people can just click on it and go to it. And what about social media?
Thank you. Social media, I'm all over the place. I'm on TikTok, Lady Ghostbuster Eleanor. I'm on Instagram as author Eleanor Wagner. I'm on Facebook as author Eleanor Wagner. I'm on LinkedIn, Tumblr, all as author Eleanor Wagner. You could just find me that way. Oh, and I have my own podcast too. It's called Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World. And it's out of the Paranormal UK Radio Network or wherever you get your podcasts. So I talk about strange and scary on that particular podcast. And in 2 weeks, I'm premiering a live podcast, which I'm really nervous about. But that one's called Creeping It Real, and it's all about ghosts and ghost stories.
Oh, cool.
On the Coast to Coast Network. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I believe I'm part of that Facebook group, the Paranormal UK.
Oh, okay, good. So then you'll
Yeah.
see the post that I post on there.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely going to share that out, and I want to thank you for your time. I really
Oh,
appreciate
thank you
you.
so much for having me. This is fun. I love talking about everything ghostly.
I hear that. Well, we might have to look y'all up if we make another trip to Jersey.
Oh, I hope you will. Please do.
So
That
if
would be great.
you ever make
We'll
it
go on
to,
an investigation.
that would be fun. If you ever make it to Texas and you're close to Austin, give us a holler. We'll be glad to
Thank you.
meet
I'll
up
do
with y'all.
that.
But
Yeah, thank you.
I also want to thank everyone. If you're new to the channel, please come back and subscribe. And if you're a regular to the channel, thank you for your support. It's because of you we do what we do. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
Po boy.